In this video, I'm going to be explaining the concept of the different type of sets I tend to prescribe most frequently in my practice. If you are one of my clients watching this on my website or in the app, this is to help prepare you for what I call your exercise prescription. So if I have different types of exercises back to back or however many sets, I need you to understand what I mean by something like a superset, or if I mention a cluster set, or if I just mention a straight set, or don't mention anything at all. What does that mean? So I'm going to go through these three most commonly used set types. There are so many different types out there. There's giant sets, there's drop sets, there's pyramiding. There's so many different ways that we can do weight training, resistance training, and exercise in general. I'm just going to cover the three that I tend to use most frequently. If you end up with something where I prescribe a giant set or a drop set, etc., anything other than what I'm mentioning in this video, I'll provide you with another instructional video to help understand a little bit better of the why and the what behind that particular type of a set. So I'm just going to be covering three in this video. The first one I want to touch on is the straight set. This is just very common. It's you complete your exercise and then you take rest in between that set. True rest. This is usually used in the context of, and it can be used in cardiovascular training. It can also be used in weight training, strength training, power training. It can be used in a variety of means. I'm going to be demonstrating very simple movements though, just for understanding it a little bit better. So let's say I had a straight set of a deadlift and I prescribed it for you with a kettlebell. The straight set then, I'm going to say, do 3 sets of, and I can say 3 RIR, which you may know already by now what I mean by RIR. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to do 10 repetitions. 3 sets, 10 repetitions. Rest between sets, 30 seconds. I may prescribe something different, but that's the general concept for this. For a straight set, what you would do is you would do the deadlift, 10 repetitions, all the way through, proper form. I'm not going to do all 10. So let's say I got to 10. That's set number 1. Now what do? I take a 30-second rest. The practical application of straight sets is very useful in weight training, strength training, power training. When we need true rest, when we need to rejuvenate our muscle glycogen, which is our sugar in our muscles, we need that rest. We don't want to be tearing down just fat, we want to be building muscle. That's when there is and I'm generalizing just to try to get the concept across to you. That's the general usage of straight sets when we want to build. We're not trying to tear things down. Very useful is a concept called circuit training. And a type of sets I often prescribe for circuit training, which are back-to-back exercises, is the superset. True supersets vary from types of muscles targeted. So I'm going to say that again. True supersets, the classic definition of a superset, is to go from one muscle group to a different muscle group with little to no rest between sets. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to show you an example of a superset, and then clarify why I'm so adamant about different muscle groups, because there's something else that I may prescribe to you later, but we'll touch on that next. Let's say I have 2 exercises in superset. First exercise is a deadlift. Second exercise is an overhead press, or a dumbbell overhead press. I am going to perform this in superset. So what that looks like. Let's say I have deadlift, 10 repetitions. Let's imagine I'm doing, all right, deadlift, 1. And I go all the way to 10. Okay, 10. Go right into it. Superset. Get your weights. Sometimes you may have little to no rest, 5-second rest in between. Get situated, changing up what equipment you're using, because now we're switching. Overhead press. 1, 2. Doing a couple exercises. All right, so there was 10, or however many repetitions I prescribed. Then in superset, because I have 3 total sets prescribed of the superset, I go right back into the deadlift for the next repetitions, back to back. Little to no rest between sets. Supersets obviously have a slight degree of rest when we are in the setting of a gym, we're changing out equipment, we're targeting the upper body versus the lower body. That can naturally cause 5-10 seconds. Okay, we're moving on to this next thing in less than 30 seconds. I'm on to this next machine. I'm on to these next set of weights, this next movement pattern. That's why they're supersets. You're not supposed to take the rest in particular, but it's kind of natural as part of the, okay, let me change. I'm not intending to rest. It just kind of happens. There's a transition. So that's a superset. In your dashboard, you may see this as A1, like a letter with a number. A1, A2. A1 being the deadlift, A2 being the overhead press. And I will let you know how many rounds or how many sets to do those supersets. Very common that I prescribe supersets ranging between upper body and lower body movement patterns. There is something called a complex. It's related to a superset, so I'll touch on it in this video. The complex is supposed to flow fluidly from exercise to exercise. And I do have examples of those, but there is definitely, ideally, no rest between sets because it all uses the same equipment. And an example of that, just to give two, for a complex, would be to perform something like a high pull snatch. It targets, okay, we're working hamstrings, we're working our shoulders and the overhead press, but then I switch right to a dumbbell push press. This is kind of the same movement, isn't it? It's pretty similar. Yes, it is. It's very similar. It's using the similar muscle groups for those movements, and it's fluidly going back to back. I'm using the same equipment. I'm not having to stop. That's a complex. So those are just some common ones that I have. Last one I want to touch on, cluster set. Cluster sets are really effective, especially for older adults. There's research that shows that cluster sets can be helpful for strength improvements as well as power. Cluster sets basically mean that if you've got, let's say, a set or one set of 8 repetitions of a movement, but you've got rest in between repetitions, clusters of those 8, let's say, for the purpose of make this easy, let's actually say it's 9 repetitions. Let's say the movement is a bicep curl, just a simple bicep curl. And I prescribed 9, the cluster set of 3, with 10 seconds rest in between. 1, 2, 3, guess what? You get to rest. 10 seconds. It lets your muscles rejuvenate back up. You get the glycogen that it needs. 1, 2, 3. You get to take a rest between. It's better for making sure form is good. This is something that I do like to prescribe for my clients when I need to focus on form. 1, 2, 3. There was my 9. There was my 9, but I got to take, of course I was talking, I got to take 10 seconds or so in between. It will vary between 5, 10, or however many seconds in between repetitions I prescribe for you, or clusters of repetitions. So that is another option that I may prescribe. And guess what? At the end of it, you may very well get to take a rest. Or you may go into superset to another exercise that is targeting the lower body. So not the upper body anymore at this point. So just to reiterate, cluster sets are ways that you can complete repetitions. You take little breaks in between, as prescribed by me, in between groups of repetitions. You may end up taking full true rest after you complete that full repetition of 9 as a cluster set. Or you may move on to another exercise in superset with that cluster set. So I just did the bicep curls for 9 repetitions in cluster set, and then I can just go right on into the lovely classic deadlift. Back to back. Those are ways that I may prescribe the exercises. They all have their place in training, and they all have their different outcomes. So again, in this video, I covered a straight set, which is very basic. Complete the movement, complete the repetitions, take the rest. Don't do other exercise during that rest. Take true rest. We covered a superset, which is going back to back with different exercises that target specific muscle groups, the opposite muscle groups, so upper body and then a lower body. That's a superset. A variation of that is the complex, which is fluid continuous movements, motions, go back to back, use probably the same equipment in the most cases, little to no rest between those movements, transitioning right into it fluidly, and they target pretty much the similar muscle groups. That's a compound, or that's a complex. The last thing I covered was cluster set. Taking little breaks, little rests in between groups of repetitions for those sets. So now you may feel armed and ready to, at this point, hopefully, to take on your exercise prescription and a little bit more informed as to what to expect.